Let's get into dev containers with Visual Studio Code now. So being a program manager at Microsoft that works on Visual Studio Code, I'm obviously a little incentivized to tell you about this, but I'm also very excited about it. I think this is one of the coolest features about Visual Studio Code. That's why I just cannot shut up about it. So these are called dev containers that we're going to get into with regards to Visual Studio Code. So first of all, if you're not a Visual Studio Code user, I'm just going to invite you to go ahead, download it, and try it out with me, and then you can uninstall it afterwards if you don't like it. And the other thing I wanted to call out is Burke Holland has a free course on Front-End Masters of how to get level up with Visual Studio Code. It's really great and totally free, so you can totally share it with your friends and coworkers. Okay, so we're going to be working with something called the Remote Containers extension. So there are several remote extensions that have come out of Visual Studio Code recently. One of them is the containers. One of them is for WSL, so you can have your Visual Studio Code connected to WSL. One of them is SSH. So you can say any box that you can SSH into, you can now connect Visual Studio Code to, which is really cool. But we're going to be getting into the remote containers one. So we're going to create a second Docker file for one of these projects. And it doesn't really matter which one, so you can pick any one of these, but one of the node ones. So let's go ahead and go into our projects folder. We're not going to do this in Hugo. We're going to do it in, which one is this? Let's do this one. The more complicated node application. Okay, so this one has a Docker file that does lots of good things, and this is like our production one that we have, right? So we're going to create another directory here inside of our more complicated node app one. And again, you could do this in any one of them. It doesn't have to be the more complicated node app. But that's just the one I'm going to do it in for right now. I want you to create a new folder in here. This one's going to be called .devcontainer. It's very important that it's be called particularly that, because that's what Visual Studio Code is looking for. Period dev container. Inside of .dev container, I want you to put a new file, which is going to be a Docker file. This is where you would define what your development environment looks like. So let's just say for our sake here, we're going to be doing it from node 12-stretch. And we need a couple of things installed in here. So we're going to say run npm install -- global ESLint and prettier. Let's say that those are the two tools that we need for our particular project. But you could put anything in here. You could put like stack tracing and all sorts of stuff in here as well. Any sort of dependency that you'll need. This is good for now, though. This is everything that we're going to need to get our container up and running. Notice I'm not going to put a CMD in this, because it's not actually about running any particular command, right? It's about setting up an environment. Okay? So that's all we need to do for our Docker file. Then next to that Docker file, same directory, in the dev container directory, we're going to create another file called devcontainer.json. Now key here, not .devcontainer.json. It's called devcontainer.json. The name here is quite important, so please make it called devcontainer.json. And it must be in the .devcontainer directory. And here we can give a bunch of information to Visual Studio Code. So this is specifically for Visual Studio Code of all the things that you want set up for your project. So you can give it a name, and that's why you can kind of tell it apart from like different windows. So we're going to call this one the Front-End Masters sample, but you can call it whatever you want. Close that. You're going to point it to where the Docker file is. So you can put your Docker file anywhere you want. Ours just happens to be here, and we're going to call it Docker file, because that's where it is. The app port, this runs on port 3000, because that's what we made it. But you could expose all the various different ports here that you need to. So I could put 8080 and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But for now, we're just going to do port 3000. Run args. So this is how we're going to run the application. We're going to do -u common node to run node. And then here we're going to do settings. And inside of settings, we can specify a bunch of different settings for Visual Studio Code itself. So let's say that it was very important that we wanted all of our users to use a particular theme. I don't know why you would do that, but you can, right? So we're going to do that. We're going to say workbench. It's nice that it lets you kind of autocomplete all these as well, right? We're going to do workbench color theme right there. And here it has all of mine listed out because it knows what they are. And we're going to do a theme from one of our other favorite front-end masters instructors, Sarah Drasner, called Night Owl. Okay, and then we're going to do terminal.integrated.shell.linux. Now, why are we going to do this? Because once you get into the container, once you're inside of the container and programming against it, you want to be able to specify which shell is the correct one. So for example, on my local computer, I have it set so ZSH is my default shell. And when I get inside of this container, it needs to be bash. And so I'm just going to be specific about that and say that bin bash is the correct terminal to use. We're going to say post create command. This is where we get into the dependency thing, right? Because once we're inside the container, once the container's up and running, then we want to run npm install, right? So that's what we're going to do. After it's finished creating the container, we're going to run npm install. And that kind of sidesteps the issue of like not having the correct dependencies and node modules and all that kind of stuff. Okay, and then here, something else very cool that you can do is you can specify which extensions that you want installed for your users, right? So someone can come into your project, and let's say your project depends on everyone using ESLint and Prettier and unit testing, right? So you can go and install for them all the extensions that they're going to need to run the project. So first of all, we made Night Owl the default. That doesn't actually come with Visual Studio Code by default, so we have to specify, please install this theme. So we're going to put sdras for Sarah Drasner .Night Owl, and that will go and install the theme for us. Okay, we'll do dbaeumer .vscode-eslint. That'll install the ESLint extension. And we'll do esbinp.prettier-vscode. And that'll get the Prettier extension, which is a code formatter for JavaScript. And ESLint is a linter, in case that was not obvious. All right, so save that. Now, there's a couple things that you can do. Let's actually do it this way. Right now, I have it here in my file explorer, I have all these different projects open. I want to open it so it's just the more complicated node project. So for a second, I'm going to minimize this. And I'm going to open a more complicated node project just itself, right? Just that in my Visual Studio Code. So now if I click open here, notice the first thing it says like, hey, you know, I noticed you have a dev container configuration file. Do you want to open this in the container? So I'm going to say, yes, I would. Thank you. So down here you can see that it's opening a remote, and click details here. And you can see it's actually running the Docker build in the background for my particular dev container. And so once it's done that, then it's going to run it for me, and it's going to attach me to the running container. I'm actually going to be doing development inside of the container, and everything's going to be working inside of the container. But then it's going to be using those port exposing so that I can actually run the code locally in my local host. So this will take a second. It does a bunch of stuff for you to get everything working and ready. So if it didn't pop up like reopen in dev container, or if you want to do it after the pop-up goes away, right now it doesn't show it in mine, but in the bottom left there's like two little like angle brackets next to each other, right? If you click that, there should be an option to reopen in container. If you're using Windows right now and you're in WSL specifically, you have to get out of WSL. So you have to click that same logo and say reopen in Windows, and then it will ask you.
So all you did was just close and reopen?
Mm-hmm. So that'll pop up, do you want to reopen this in a container? So notice here, now I'm totally different theme, right? And you can see here I'm in dev container front-end master sample. And here if I click plus, if I say cat etc issue, you can see here I'm inside a Debian, right? So I'm actually inside of the container right now doing development, but it's the same project. If I say node index.js, it'll run my project. And if I open this, you'll see that it's still running. You can even see that it opened it on a different port. I didn't even know it was going to do that, but it just kind of does that for you. So coming back here to VS Code, I now have this little remote explorer over here. You can see here, remote explorer. It should tell me, there, it's going to be in here. So here the forwarded ports. I can actually see all the ports that it's forwarding and where they're going to, and I can reconfigure them and a bunch of stuff like that as well. Any questions?
So how does it, here's what I'm trying to think. So it's all great, you're in the container, you're doing your development there. I'm assuming that's where all your content is saved, right? Now you want to check it into, now you want to commit and basically follow your regular workflow. How does that work? Just the regular way?
So it's a bind mount, right? So it's actually writing to the host operating system.
So that's what it does.
Yep. Good question. Did you get it to work? Did you get it to work?
Still working on it.
Still working on it. Yeah, with Windows and WSL, it's a little, we're working on that. We're going to make that a better experience. But for right now, you have to exit out of WSL and then reconnect it. Here, at any time, though, I can say, clicking on this little thing down here, I can say close remote connection or whatever you want. And actually, it's just a click close remote connection. This will send me back into normal VS Code land. And then down here, you can always say reopen folder in container, right? So you can do all that stuff at any time. So let's see. So I want to show you how to be like a little bit evil to your coworkers because it's fun. Where is this? So we're just going to open this again. And we're going to open the more complicated node project. So right now I'm not going to open this in container. We're going to do it again here in just a second. So here's a fun April Fool's joke to play on your coworkers. And do not do it to me because I will be very upset. So we're going to go back over here to our dev container.json. And instead of being on Night Owl, we're going to make this hot dog stand. So we're going to make this hot dog stand. And instead of installing Night Owl right here, we're going to put some kittens.hotDogStand. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is going to burn your eyeballs as soon as we reopen this. So if you don't want your eyeballs burned, just don't click open a container right now. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm going to click this and say reopen in container, right? So it's going to go through, rebuild the container. I'm going to click rebuild. So hot dog container, or a hot dog theme I found out the other day is actually from Windows 3.1. There was a theme that you could put on Windows 3.1 that was just the worst theme in the entire world, and someone recreated it for Visual Studio Code. And it's just horrifying. I can't even look at it for very long. Like, it gives me a headache. So if you have a dev container for your work, just go change this to hot dog container and you get this just monstrosity. Okay, I have to stop. I'm so sorry to all the people I've harmed out there now. But pretty cool. And you can do all sorts of like crazy stuff. Like you could go in and make the font Times New Roman by default or something like that. Like you could be, or like Comic Sans. Ooh, we should have done Comic Sans. Anyway, next time. All right. So we'll close remote connection. That's all I wanted to show you with Visual Studio Code. I think this is a truly compelling workflow for you and your team, right? You could all just come up with your dev container And then as soon as someone just opens their Visual Studio Code with that in there, it's just like, hey, we're going to open this in a container for you. We'll set everything up for you. Just sit back and wait, and then once it's done, everything will just be working for you. Oh, the thing I didn't show you but was happening is ESLint and Prettier were all automatically installed as well. So if I started saving my work, it would automatically be formatting and linting my code for me just out of the box, which is great too.